Stop there. Ma'am, the cleaning supplies are in the basement.
Sir, I think there's been a mistake. I'm Aurelia Blackthorne, your new managing director.
I stood frozen in that marble-floored lobby, my Harvard MBA degree feeling like worthless paper in my briefcase. The security guard's words echoed through the cavernous space of Sterling Industries' Manhattan headquarters, and I watched as every pair of eyes in that pristine reception area turned toward me with that familiar mixture of pity and assumption. The silence that followed was deafening. You know what hurts the most about discrimination? It's not the obvious slurs or the blatant hatred. It's the casual assumption that your skin color determines your worth before you even open your mouth. That moment in Sterling Industries' lobby wasn't my first encounter with American prejudice, but it would become the catalyst for everything that followed. Let me tell you how I learned that sometimes the biggest mistake of your life can become your greatest victory. Hey beautiful people, if you're watching from the US, Canada, UK, or Australia, drop your location in the comments below. I want to see where my amazing viewers are from. And if this story already has you feeling some type of way, smash that subscribe button because you're in for a ride. The security guard, whose name tag read Marcus Thompson, looked me up and down with barely concealed skepticism. I was wearing my best navy suit, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy from Nordstrom, with my hair pulled back in what I hoped was an authoritative bun. But apparently, none of that mattered when your skin was the color of rich coffee and you were standing in a building that screamed old money and older prejudices. I'm going to need to see some identification, Marcus said, his tone shifting slightly. Behind him, I could see Janet approaching with a mop bucket, confusion written across her weathered face. I pulled out my driver's license and the official letter from Sterling Industries' HR department. As Marcus examined them, I caught my reflection in the polished marble walls. Aurelia Blackthorne stared back at me, 28 years old, born in London to Jamaican immigrants, raised in Toronto, educated at Harvard, and now standing in New York feeling like an imposter in my own success story. This says you're the new managing director, Marcus said slowly, as if the words didn't compute. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you. A voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. What seems to be the problem here? I turned and felt my breath catch. The man approaching us was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair that looked like it had been styled by angels and eyes the color of storm clouds. His suit probably cost more than my monthly rent, and he moved with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having to prove your worth to anyone. This had to be him. Nathaniel Sterling, the billionaire CEO whose company I was about to help revolutionize. Mr. Sterling, Marcus stammered, there seems to be some confusion about. No confusion at all, I interrupted, stepping forward with my hand extended. Nathaniel Sterling, I presume? I'm Aurelia Blackthorne, your new managing director. I believe we had a meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Nathaniel Sterling stared at my outstretched hand. His grey eyes traveled from my face to my suit to the briefcase at my side, and I watched as something shifted in his expression. Surprise. Disappointment. Prejudice wrapped in expensive cologne. Finally, he shook my hand, his grip firm but brief. Ms. Blackthorne. Yes, of course. His smile was perfectly polite and completely empty. Marcus, please escort Ms. Blackthorne to the executive floor. I'll meet you in conference room A in 10 minutes. As we walked toward the elevator, I could feel dozens of eyes following our progress. Whispered conversations started and stopped as we passed, and I caught fragments that made my jaw clench. Is that really? I thought they were hiring someone more. Sterling's really taking this diversity thing seriously. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere because of how you look, let me know in the comments. Your support means everything, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this story unfolds. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was suffocating. Marcus kept glancing at me like I might spontaneously combust, while I tried to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. When the doors opened, I was greeted by a reception area that looked like it belonged in a museum, all dark wood, leather, and oil paintings of stern-faced white men who probably built their fortunes on the backs of people who looked like me. Conference room A is just down the hall, Marcus said, his tone still uncertain. "Mr. Sterling will be with you shortly." I walked into that conference room like I owned it, because fake it till you make it had gotten me this far. The room was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Manhattan. A long mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. I was reviewing my presentation notes when the door opened and Nathaniel Sterling entered, followed by a woman who looked like she'd stepped off the pages of Vogue. She was tall, blonde, and beautiful in that effortless way that money can buy. Her smile was as sharp as her cheekbones. "Ms. Blackthorne," Nathaniel said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I'd like you to meet my sister, Vivienne Sterling. She's our Vice President of Strategic Development." Vivienne's handshake was ice-cold. "How lovely to meet you, Ms. Blackthorne. I must say, when Daddy told us about our new hire, we weren't quite expecting." She paused, her blue eyes scanning me like I was a curiosity in a zoo. "Well, you." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What exactly were you expecting?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the fire building in my chest. "Someone with more traditional experience," Vivienne said smoothly. "Our clients tend to be quite conservative. Old family money, you understand. They value certain aesthetics." And there it was. The polite way of saying I was too black for their precious company. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. I opened my briefcase and pulled out my presentation folder. "Well, I suppose it's fortunate that my Harvard MBA, 5 years of experience at Goldman Sachs, and the strategic plan I've developed to increase your quarterly profits by 30% have nothing to do with aesthetics." For the next hour, I presented my vision for Sterling Industries. I outlined market opportunities they'd missed, inefficiencies in their current operations, and innovative strategies that could position them as industry leaders. I watched as Nathaniel's expression changed from skeptical to surprised to genuinely impressed. Vivienne, however, looked like she'd swallowed something sour. "These are interesting ideas," Nathaniel said when I finished. "Some of them are quite ambitious." "Ambitious is what you hired me for," I replied. "Unless there was some miscommunication about my role here." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course not. I think we should schedule follow-up meetings to discuss implementation." "How wonderful," Vivienne said, her tone dripping with false enthusiasm. "I'm sure our clients will be fascinated by these new approaches." As they left the conference room, I heard Vivienne's voice in the hallway. "Really, Nathan? Are you sure about this?" His response was too quiet to hear, but something told me I was about to face a battle I hadn't anticipated. "You know what? I'm curious, have you ever been in a situation where people doubted you before you even got started? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you're invested in seeing how Aurelia handles these microaggressions, hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started." My first week at Sterling Industries was like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Every morning, I'd arrive at 7 a.m. to find my office mysteriously locked, forcing me to track down building maintenance. Meeting invitations would somehow get lost in email, leaving me to discover important discussions had happened without me. Documents I needed would disappear from shared drives, only to reappear after I'd spent hours recreating them. But the worst part wasn't the obvious sabotage, it was the subtle erosion of my authority that happened every single day. In meetings, my ideas would be interrupted, dismissed, or mysteriously attributed to someone else 5 minutes later. When I'd speak up to reclaim credit, I'd be met with patronizing smiles and comments about being a team player or not being so sensitive. The breaking point came during my second week. I was presenting my quarterly strategy to the executive board, 12 white men and 1 white woman, all of whom looked like they'd rather be having root canals. My presentation was flawless. I'd spent countless hours perfecting every slide, every statistic, every projection. "As you can see," I said, clicking to my final slide, "implementing these changes will result in a minimum 30% increase in quarterly revenue, with potential for up to 50% growth by year-end." The room was silent. Then Richard Ashworth, the chief financial officer, leaned back in his chair with a condescending smile. Ms. Blackthorne, these numbers seem rather optimistic. Are you certain you've accounted for all variables? Sometimes fresh perspectives can overlook crucial details that those of us with more experience might catch. I felt my jaw tighten. Mr. Ashworth, I've triple-checked these projections. They're based on comprehensive market analysis and proven strategic models. Of course, he said, waving his hand dismissively. But perhaps we should have someone with more experience review these before we present them to our clients. James, didn't you work on something similar at your previous position? James Morrison, a man who'd graduated from business school 2 years after me and had half my experience, suddenly straightened in his seat. Actually, yes. I think I could refine these projections and make them more realistic. I watched in stunned silence as my months of work were casually handed over to someone else because my expertise wasn't trusted. Excellent, Richard said. James, why don't you take the lead on this project? Ms. Blackthorne can assist you with the more administrative aspects. Administrative aspects. Like I was a secretary instead of the managing director. I looked around the room, hoping someone would speak up. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, I saw something flicker across his face, guilt, regret. But he said nothing. Actually, I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair rolled backward, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my role here. The room fell silent. I wasn't hired to be anyone's assistant. I was hired as managing director because of my expertise, my experience, and my proven track record. If this company isn't ready to trust the person they hired to do the job they hired her for, then perhaps this isn't the right fit. I gathered my presentation materials and walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Ms. Blackthorne, Nathaniel called out. Please wait. I turned back, hoping to see support in his eyes. Instead, I saw concern, not for the injustice that had just occurred, but for the disruption I was causing. Perhaps we could discuss this privately, he said diplomatically. Perhaps we could discuss why my qualifications seem to disappear every time I walk into a room, I replied. Or why ideas that sound revolutionary when they come out of my mouth suddenly become administrative when they need to be presented to clients. Richard Ashworth cleared his throat. Ms. Blackthorne, I think you're being rather dramatic. No one questioned your qualifications. Didn't you? I challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like every decision I make needs to be validated by someone who looks like you before it's taken seriously. The silence that followed was deafening. I think we should all take a step back, Nathaniel said carefully. Perhaps emotions are running high, and we need to. Emotions. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mr. Sterling, if James had presented this exact same strategy, would you have questioned his projections? Would you have suggested he needed supervision? Would you have reassigned his work to someone with more experience? The truth hung in the air like smoke, visible to everyone but acknowledged by no one. I walked out of that boardroom with my head held high, but inside, I was crumbling. As I made my way back to my office, I could hear the whispered conversations starting behind me. Well, that was intense. I told you this was a mistake. Some people just aren't cut out for this environment. Okay, real talk, if you're watching this and thinking this is too much or she's overreacting, I need you to really think about that. Because this is the reality for so many people of color in corporate America. If you're feeling fired up about this injustice, show me by hitting that subscribe button and telling me in the comments where you're watching from. That afternoon, I sat in my office staring at my computer screen, trying to decide if I should update my resume or draft a resignation letter. The Manhattan skyline stretched out before me, all glass and steel and possibilities that felt increasingly out of reach. A soft knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting to see HR with my walking papers. Instead, Nathaniel Sterling stepped into my office, closing the door behind him. He looked uncomfortable, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Ms. Blackthorne, Aurelia, may I call you Aurelia? You can call me whatever you'd like, Mr. Sterling. It's your company. He winced at my tone. Please, sit down. I think we need to talk. About what? About how I'm too emotional for your boardroom. About how my ideas need to be filtered through someone more experienced. Or about how I should be grateful for the opportunity to be your token diversity hire. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? I stood up, unable to contain my frustration any longer. Mr. Sterling, I've been here 2 weeks. In that time, I've been mistaken for cleaning staff, had my work sabotaged, my authority undermined, and my expertise questioned at every turn. And not once, have I seen you stand up and say this woman is qualified for this job. He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes studying my face. You're right, he said finally. And I'm sorry. The apology caught me off guard. Sorry doesn't fix systemic racism, Mr. Sterling. No, it doesn't. But maybe we can work together to fix what's happening here. I laughed bitterly. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, you've been part of the problem. Your silence in that boardroom was deafening. I know. He moved closer, and I caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made my traitorous heart skip a beat. I know I failed you today, but I want to make it right. There was something in his voice, something raw and genuine that made me look at him, really look at him. His perfectly composed exterior had cracked, and underneath I saw something I hadn't expected. Shame. Why? I asked. Why does it matter to you? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I've been watching you for 2 weeks, and you're brilliant. Your strategies are innovative, your insights are sharp, and your presentation today was the most impressive thing I've heard in this company in years. And I've been too much of a coward to say so publicly. My heart did something complicated in my chest. A coward? Yes. He met my eyes directly. I've spent my entire life in rooms where everyone looks like me, thinks like me, comes from the same world I come from. I told myself I hired you because you were the best candidate, and you are. But I never considered what it would be like for you to be the only person who doesn't look like everyone else. And now you're considering it. Now I'm realizing that hiring diverse talent doesn't mean anything if you don't create an environment where that talent can thrive. He paused. I'm realizing that I've been complicit in a system that I never had to think about because it never worked against me. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me since I'd arrived at Sterling Industries. It was also dangerous, because it made me want to believe that change was possible. What are you proposing, Mr. Sterling? Partnership, he said immediately. Real partnership. I'll back your strategies publicly. I'll make it clear to the board and to every employee in this company that you have my full support and that questioning your authority is questioning mine. And in return, help me understand how to do better. Help me build a company where talent is recognized regardless of what it looks like. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or false promises. Instead, I saw something I wasn't prepared for, genuine attraction. Not just physical, though that was certainly there, but intellectual attraction. The kind that comes from recognizing someone who challenges you to be better than you are. This isn't going to be easy, I said carefully. Change never is, especially when it threatens people's comfortable assumptions. I know. Your sister is going to hate it. Vivienne will adjust. Your board might revolt. Then we'll prove them wrong. The confidence in his voice sent a shiver through me. This was a man who was used to getting what he wanted, and apparently, what he wanted was to support me. All right, Mr. Sterling. Partnership it is. But I have conditions. Name them. First, James Morrison does not touch my strategy. That project remains mine. Done. Second, I want authority over my own team. I get to hire my own analysts and assistants, and they report directly to me. Agreed. Third, if anyone in this company undermines my authority again, there are consequences. Real consequences, not just a stern talking to. His smile was sharp and dangerous. I can work with that. As he turned to leave, He paused at the door. Aurelia. Yes. For what it's worth, I think you're going to revolutionize this company. After he left, I sat back down at my desk with my head spinning. Nathaniel Sterling was either the ally I desperately needed or the most sophisticated manipulator I'd ever encountered. Either way, I was about to find out which. I have to ask, do you think Nathaniel is genuine, or is this all a game to him? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're as invested in Aurelia's journey as I am, make sure you're subscribed because the plot is about to get so much more complicated. The next morning brought the first real test of Nathaniel's promises. I arrived at the office to find an email waiting for me. James Morrison had scheduled a meeting with 3 of our biggest clients to present his version of my strategy. The meeting was set for 10 a.m., in 30 minutes. I stormed down the hallway to Nathaniel's corner office, my heels clicking against the marble floor like bullets. His assistant, a pristine blonde woman named Charlotte, tried to stop me. Ms. Blackthorne, Mr. Sterling is in a conference call with. I walked past her and straight into his office. Nathaniel was indeed on a call, his feet up on his desk as he discussed quarterly projections with someone in London. When he saw my face, he immediately wrapped up the conversation. I'll call you back, Thompson. He hung up and stood. Aurelia, what's wrong? I tossed my phone onto his desk, showing him the email. This is what's wrong. He read it quickly, and I watched his expression darken. Son of a bitch. So much for partnership, I said bitterly. I guess James didn't get the memo about respecting my authority. Nathaniel was already reaching for his jacket. Come on. Where are we going? To remind James Morrison exactly who runs this company. We marched down to the conference room where James was setting up his presentation. Through the glass walls, I could see our clients had already arrived. Mr. Whitfield from Whitfield Holdings, Mrs. Chen from Pacific Investments, and Mr. Rodriguez from Rodriguez and Associates. Old money, new money, and international money. Exactly the kind of clients Vivienne claimed would have problems with my aesthetics. Nathaniel didn't bother knocking. He walked into that conference room like an avenging angel, and I followed close behind. Good morning, gentlemen, Mrs. Chen, Nathaniel said smoothly. I hope you don't mind, but there's been a change in today's presentation. James looked up from his laptop, confusion written across his face. Mr. Sterling, I thought you were aware of. What I'm aware of, Nathaniel interrupted, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the room straighten up, is that someone scheduled a meeting to present Ms. Blackthorne's strategy without Ms. Blackthorne present. The clients exchanged glances. Mr. Whitfield, a distinguished man in his 70s, leaned forward in his chair. Ms. Blackthorne. Our managing director, Nathaniel said, gesturing to me. The architect of the strategy you're here to discuss. I watched James's face turn red. Mr. Sterling, I was just trying to. You were just trying to take credit for work that isn't yours, I said, stepping forward. Which, frankly, is both unprofessional and unethical. Mrs. Chen, an elegant woman in her 50s, looked intrigued. Ms. Blackthorne, we weren't told you'd be joining us today. That's because Mr. Morrison decided to schedule this meeting without consulting me, I replied. Apparently, he thought he could present my work better than I could. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mr. Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s, leaned back in his chair. Well, this is awkward. Not awkward, Nathaniel said firmly. Clarifying. James, you can go. Ms. Blackthorne will be handling this presentation. James opened his mouth to protest, but something in Nathaniel's expression stopped him. He packed up his materials and left the room, his humiliation evident to everyone present. Now, I said, moving to the front of the room and connecting my laptop to the projector, let me show you what Sterling Industries can really do. For the next hour, I presented my strategy with passion, precision, and confidence. I watched as the client's initial surprise gave way to interest, then to genuine excitement. These weren't people who cared about my skin color, they cared about results, and I was offering them results that would make them very, very wealthy. Ms. Blackthorne, Mr. Whitfield said when I finished, This is the most innovative approach to market expansion I've seen in 30 years. The projected returns are extraordinary. The risk management alone is worth the investment, Mrs. Chen added. Your analysis of the Asian markets is particularly impressive. Mr. Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. When can we start implementation? I glanced at Nathaniel, who was leaning against the wall with something that looked suspiciously like pride in his expression. We can begin the preliminary phases within 2 weeks, I said. I'll have detailed timelines and resource allocation plans to you by Friday. After the clients left, each of them having signed preliminary agreements worth millions, Nathaniel and I were alone in the conference room. That, he said, was incredible. That was my job, I replied, but I couldn't keep the satisfaction out of my voice. No, that was mastery. He moved closer, and suddenly the large conference room felt intimate. You just secured 3 of the biggest deals this company has ever seen. We secured them, I corrected. Your support in there meant everything. My support was the bare minimum of what you deserved. His voice was low, and there was something in his grey eyes that made my breath catch. Aurelia, I need to ask you something. What? Have dinner with me. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications that went far beyond business partnerships. Mr. Sterling. Nathaniel. Please. Nathaniel, I said carefully, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because you're a billionaire and I'm a woman who's still fighting to prove she belongs in your world. Because office romances are complicated and dangerous. Because I've already been accused of sleeping my way to the top, and actually sleeping with the top would only confirm everyone's worst assumptions. Because it's unprofessional, I said instead. So was what happened today, he countered. So is half of what happens in corporate America. At least dinner would be honest. Honest about what? He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes. About the fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you walked into this building. About the fact that watching you present today was the most attracted I've ever been to anyone's mind. About the fact that I want to know everything about you that has nothing to do with business. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Nathaniel. One dinner, he said. If you hate it, we go back to being strictly professional. But if you don't. He let the sentence hang unfinished. Every rational part of my brain was screaming warnings. This was dangerous territory, the kind that could destroy my career and confirm every stereotype about black women in corporate America. But there was another part of me, a part that had been lonely in this new country and tired of fighting every battle alone, that whispered, what if he's different? One dinner, I heard myself saying. But somewhere private. I can't afford to be seen as the woman who slept her way to the boardroom. His smile was soft and understanding. My penthouse. 8 o'clock. I'll cook. You cook. I'm full of surprises, Aurelia Blackthorne. As he left the conference room, I realized I was about to find out just how many surprises Nathaniel Sterling was hiding. Okay, I need to know what you think. Is Aurelia making a huge mistake, or could this actually work? And more importantly, do you think Nathaniel's feelings are genuine? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. That evening, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, changing clothes for the 4th time. What do you wear to dinner with your billionaire boss who might be falling for you? Professional seemed too cold, sexy seemed too dangerous, and casual seemed too dismissive of the magnitude of what was happening. I finally settled on a black dress that was elegant without being revealing, paired with heels that made me feel powerful. As I looked at my reflection, I practiced what I would say if this whole evening turned out to be a mistake. Nathaniel's penthouse was in one of those buildings where the elevator required a special key just to reach the top floor. As I rode up 43 floors, my stomach did complicated gymnastics. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, I stepped into a space that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Manhattan. The decor was sophisticated but warm, with rich colors and comfortable furniture that invited you to stay a while. Original artwork hung on the walls, pieces I recognized from my art history classes that probably cost more than most people's houses. "You made it," Nathaniel said, appearing from what I assumed was the kitchen. He'd changed out of his business suit into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that made his grey eyes look stormy. He looked younger, more relaxed, and devastatingly handsome. "Your home is beautiful," I said, trying not to gawk at the view. "Thank you. Wine." He handed me a glass of something red and expensive, and I followed him to the kitchen, which was larger than my entire apartment. Something smelled incredible. "You weren't joking about cooking," I said, watching him check something in the oven. "Coq au vin," he said. "My grandmother's recipe. She insisted that every sterling learn to cook, regardless of how much money we had." Smart grandmother. She was. She would have liked you. "What makes you think that?" He turned from the stove to look at me directly. She had no patience for people who let others define their worth. She always said that character was the only currency that mattered. We moved to the living room, settling on a couch that faced the spectacular view. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reflected off the glass towers surrounding us. "Can I ask you something?" I said, curling up in the corner of the couch. "Anything. Why did you really hire me?" He was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "Honestly, because you were the most qualified candidate we interviewed. Your strategies were innovative, your references were glowing, and your presentation was flawless. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't also feel pressure to diversify our leadership team. The board had been making noises about our image problem with younger, more socially conscious investors. I appreciated his honesty, even if it stung a little. So I was the diversity hire. "You were the best hire who also happened to address our diversity problem," he corrected. "The fact that you're a black woman wasn't why I hired you, but it wasn't irrelevant either. And now I realize that hiring you was the easy part. Creating an environment where you can succeed has been much harder than I anticipated. Because you never had to think about it before." "Exactly." He set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. "Aurelia, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Do you think I hired you because I was attracted to you?" The question caught me off guard. "Were you?" "From the moment you walked into my office for that first interview, yes. But that's not why I hired you. I hired you because you were brilliant. The attraction was an unexpected complication." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Unexpected. I've never been attracted to anyone I work with. I've certainly never been attracted to someone who challenges me the way you do. How do I challenge you? You make me question everything I thought I knew about leadership, about fairness, about the world I live in. He leaned closer, and I could smell his cologne again. You make me want to be better than I am. The air between us was charged with possibility. I could feel myself leaning toward him, drawn by the intensity in his eyes and the honesty in his voice. "Nathaniel," I whispered, "this is dangerous." "I know. If anyone finds out." "No one will find out unless we want them to. Your sister already hates me. If she knew about this. Vivienne doesn't get to dictate my personal life." His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I felt myself melting into his touch. "Aurelia, I know this is complicated. I know there are risks. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone before." When he kissed me, it was soft and tentative at first, as if he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't want to pull away. I wanted to fall into this moment, into the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could have both professional success and personal happiness. The kiss deepened, and I felt years of loneliness and isolation melt away. This was dangerous, yes, but it was also the first time since arriving in America that I felt truly seen and valued for who I was. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "The timer," Nathaniel said softly. "What?" "The dinner timer. It's been going off." I laughed, suddenly aware of the beeping sound coming from the kitchen. "Your grandmother's coq au vin. Can wait 5 more minutes," he said, pulling me back into his arms. As we kissed again, surrounded by the glittering lights of Manhattan, I allowed myself to believe that maybe this story could have a happy ending after all. I had no idea that across town, Vivienne Sterling was making plans to ensure it didn't. Oh my goodness, the chemistry. But also, I'm worried about what Vivienne is planning. What do you think? Are you team Nathaniel and Aurelia? Or do you think this is going to end in disaster? Let me know in the comments, and if you're as invested as I am, smash that subscribe button. The next few weeks were like living in a fairy tale and a nightmare simultaneously. Professionally, things were better than they'd ever been. Nathaniel kept his promise about backing my authority. When Richard Ashworth tried to question one of my decisions in a board meeting, Nathaniel shut him down so firmly that Richard actually apologized to me afterward. When a client made a comment about being surprised by my expertise, Nathaniel made it clear that any disrespect toward me was disrespect toward him personally. But personally, I was falling hard for a man who represented everything I'd been taught to be wary of, and I was doing it in secret. Our relationship developed in stolen moments. Late-night dinners in his penthouse after everyone else had gone home. Text messages that had nothing to do with business. Looks across conference room tables that made my heart race and my concentration falter. The problem with secrets is that they have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments. It was a Thursday evening, and I was staying late to finalize the Rodriguez account implementation. The office was mostly empty, just security guards and a few workaholics like myself. I was deep in financial projections when I heard the soft knock on my door. "Come in," I called, expecting to see the cleaning staff. Instead, Vivienne Sterling glided into my office like a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. She was immaculate as always, but there was something different about her expression, something sharp and dangerous. "Ms. Blackthorne," she said, closing the door behind her. "Working late again, I see." "The Rodriguez implementation requires attention to detail," I replied carefully. "Is there something I can help you with?" Vivienne smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, yes. I think we need to have a conversation about boundaries." She placed a manila envelope on my desk. Inside were photographs, high-resolution images of Nathaniel and me at his penthouse window, kissing, his hands in my hair, my body pressed against his. My blood turned to ice. "Interesting how the cleaning staff at Nathan's building are always looking for a little extra income," Vivienne said conversationally. "Amazing what people will photograph for the right price." I forced my voice to remain steady. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. For you to understand that you don't belong in our world." She leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against my desk. "You see, Aurelia, may I call you Aurelia, you've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding." "Which is?" "That my brother's infatuation with you changes anything about your position here." Her smile turned predatory. "Nathan has always been drawn to projects. Charity cases that make him feel noble and progressive. But eventually, reality sets in." "Is that what you think I am? A charity case?" "I think you're a brilliant woman who's confused temporary lust with lasting love." Vivienne stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer to our London office, a lovely promotion, really, and this unfortunate entanglement with my brother will end quietly. And if I refuse? Then these photos find their way to every major business publication in New York. Billionaire CEO's diversity hire, how far will ambition go? Can you imagine the headlines? Your career would be over before you could say sexual harassment lawsuit." The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. "You would destroy your own brother's reputation to get rid of me." "Nathan will recover. Sterling men always do. But you." She tilted her head, considering. "A black woman who allegedly slept her way to the top. That's not a reputation you come back from, dear." After she left, I sat in my office staring at those photographs, my hands shaking. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd achieved, reduced to a scandalous story that would follow me for the rest of my career. I was still sitting there an hour later when Nathaniel appeared in my doorway. "Aurelia, I saw your light on and He stopped when he saw my face. What's wrong? I slid the envelope across my desk without a word. I watched his expression change as he looked through the photographs. Confusion, then anger, then something that looked like resignation. Vivienne, he said quietly. She wants me to transfer to London. Quietly disappear from your life before this becomes a scandal. And what do you want? It was such a simple question with such a complicated answer. What I wanted was to fight. What I wanted was for him to choose me over his sister's threats and society's expectations. What I wanted was for love to be enough to overcome prejudice and power. But what I'd learned in my 28 years was that wanting something didn't make it possible. I want you to be honest with me, I said instead. If this comes out, if these photos are published and the story becomes public, what happens? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know, he finally admitted. The board might pressure me to resign. Our clients might be concerned about the company's image. The press would be merciless. And you would resent me for it. No, he said immediately. Aurelia, no. I would never. You wouldn't mean to, I said softly. But eventually, when the pressure mounted and the cost became clear, you would wonder if I was worth it. And the answer would be no. That's not true. Isn't it? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had promised me so much and delivered such complicated truths. Nathaniel, I've spent my entire life being strong enough for two people because I've never had a choice. I won't spend the rest of it being the woman who destroyed your legacy. You're not destroying anything. You're the best thing that's happened to this company. You're the best thing that's happened to me. I turned back to face him, memorizing every detail of his face. Then let me go while you still feel that way. Aurelia. I'm going to take the London position, I said, my voice steady despite the breaking in my chest. It's a good opportunity, and it's the right thing to do. For who? For both of us. The pain in his eyes nearly broke my resolve. This is what she wants. You know that, right? Vivienne is manipulating both of us. I know. But sometimes the manipulator wins because they're willing to play dirtier than you are. He crossed the room and pulled me into his arms, and I let myself melt into him one last time. I love you, he whispered against my hair. I know it's complicated and messy and probably too soon, but I love you. I love you too, I admitted, the words both a gift and a goodbye. That's why I'm leaving. 6 months later, I was the CEO of Sterling Industries European operations, running a billion-dollar division from a corner office in London with a view of the Thames. My strategies had increased their European market share by 60%, and I was being courted by headhunters from companies around the world. But success tastes different when it comes at the cost of love. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on my door. Ms. Blackthorne. There's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's personal. I looked up to find Nathaniel Sterling standing in my doorway, looking travel-worn and determined. Hello, Aurelia. What are you doing here? Vivienne resigned this morning, he said without preamble. The FBI investigation into her embezzlement scheme finally caught up with her. Turns out she'd been siphoning funds for years to pay for her lifestyle. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Embezzlement. That's how she afforded the private investigators and the photographs. Company money. His smile was grim. She'll probably do time. I'm sorry. I know she's your sister. She made her choices. He moved closer to my desk. Just like I'm making mine. Which are? I sold Sterling Industries. I nearly fell out of my chair. You what? Sold it. To a consortium of investors who don't give a damn about old family names or traditional values. They care about results, and they want you to run it. Nathaniel. I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations, he said firmly. I'm done letting fear make my decisions. And I'm done letting the woman I love build an empire on another continent because I was too much of a coward to fight for her. He dropped to one knee beside my desk, and my heart stopped. Marry me, Aurelia. Not because it's convenient or politically correct or good for business. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to choose between your dreams and your happiness again. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my London office, I could see the Thames flowing toward the sea, carrying away the past and promising new adventures ahead. One condition, I said, my voice barely steady. Anything. Next time someone mistakes me for the cleaning lady, you better speak up immediately. His laugh was pure joy. Deal. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, a stunning vintage piece that looked like it belonged in a museum, I realized something important. Sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is assuming that love isn't strong enough to change the world. Sometimes, just sometimes, it is. And that's how a billionaire's mistake became a love story that changed everything. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in the power of love to overcome prejudice and fear, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you thought. Because every ending is just the beginning of a new story, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Remember, your worth isn't determined by who accepts you, it's determined by who you choose to be. Keep shining. Beautiful people. Keep shining. Don't forget, subscribing to this channel is your little way of supporting us to keep on giving you beautiful stories like this. Kindly hit that subscribe button to join this family. See you in the next video.